Alright, YouTube, I hate to toot my own horn again, but I was correct on why the RNC's ratings were low. The DNC suffered the same fate. Uh, right after the Republican convention, Trump had spoken, people were compiling the total ratings and so forth. The Democrats were crowing loud and long about how the Republican convention had drawn in quite low ratings overall viewership as compared with past Republican conventions. Now, at the time, some of these people didn't want to believe me. I said, number one, the DNC's ratings will be similar. Hillary's ratings, as far as her actual acceptance speech, will be lower than Trump's because it wasn't as compelling a speech. And it has to do with the death of television culture and the rise of decentralized information sharing. That is, a lot of people, they no longer have the attention span to watch a 30-minute, hour-long speech. Instead, they're going to watch some YouTubers potentially review of the speech instead. They're not going to watch the entire speech themselves, let alone stream the entire convention. Now, where they're watching the convention, increasingly the younger voters, the under 35s especially, are watching it on the internet or something like that. They're not watching it on TV. They don't even, half of them don't even fucking watch TV at all. I know, myself included. I didn't watch any part of the conventions on TV. What I did watch, I watched on internet live streams broadcast across YouTube. It just makes more sense. It's easier, it's more interactive, it's more fun. There's no reason to just sit in front of the boob tube for hours watching a bunch of politicians rant. And I predicted this. And I was right. The DNC's overall ratings are about the same as the RNC's overall ratings, which is to say shit compared to the last convention. This is a function of the death. It has nothing to do with, oh, well, Trump and Hillary are just boring and people didn't want to watch them. They were watching them. It's just they were watching them online. This is another problem with, like, polling firms and stuff. Conducting a phone poll of landlines. Yeah, I'm sure that the under 50 crowd, most of them still use landlines. There's no landline in this house. There's no landline in most houses at this point. People either they use their cell phone or they just talk through Skype or something like that. But these people were crowing so happily about how supposedly Trump and the Republican convention were terrible because the ratings were lower than in 2012 or 2008. But in 2012 and 2008, a lot more people were still watching television. So that's another notch in my belt. I'd like to point out one thing. Somebody said I was wrong about Trump's VP pick. I wasn't. What had I said early on, like 6 months ago? I said he will gravitate towards, and he would be wise to do this, people who are executives within swing states, especially within the Rust Belt. Mike Pence is a former executive figure within Indiana, which is a swing state, in the Rust Belt. I wasn't wrong. Additionally, I kept talking about how Kasich was probably, of the people that had run, he was the only one that I thought Trump would actually consider. Maybe Marco Rubio, but more likely Kasich. Turns out he did consider Kasich. In fact, Kasich was at the top of his list for some time and spurned the concept of being the VP candidate. Now, Kasich and Pence are kind of similar. Kasich's more well-liked, and he's in a more important swing state in the Rust Belt. Ohio is a little bit more competitive than Indiana. Kasich's approval is a little bit higher than Pence's. It would have benefited Trump to get Kasich on board, especially since Kasich, during the race, distinguished himself as largely being above the fray for most of the race. I understand, yes, he's sort of globalist, centrist, corporatist. I understand. So is Mike Pence. It's a real problem. For me, it's not a problem for the average core Republican voter. They don't care. They're looking at Trump. They say, well, he's against globalism. The fact that his VP, his running mate, is not so much against globalism. And ultimately, it doesn't really matter much. It's really more Mike Pence's attitude and some of his past bullshit that he's done that really turned me off to the ticket. And by the way, I will say this. Another reason why I can't really support the two-party system, my analysis would suffer significant bias, or at least be perceived as being biased if I did so. It wouldn't make any sense. One reason that I was accurate throughout the primaries is fairly early on, I voted for Trump in the primaries, but for most of the term there, I said, well, I'm a libertarian. I'm a Gary Johnson supporter. I was glad that he was the nominee of the Libertarian Party. Austin Peterson was fine. But overall, I thought Gary Johnson had more of the ability to actually get it into the spotlight in the public. I think you need a pragmatist before you get ideologues. It's just sort of the way that it works, unless you intend to undergo a bloody revolution against the bourgeois or something like that. You know, you're going to go Che Guevara mode or something like that. But I was right. I was right on Trump's VP pick. I hadn't specifically looked at Mike Pence until the end when he listed him as being on the list that he had narrowed down. I was glad it wasn't Chris Christie. I think that would have been the worst possible choice he could make. Mike Pence was a close second, though, and in a three-way grouping there, I thought Newt Gingrich perhaps was the strongest possible person he could pick. I think he decided to keep him more of as a campaign, like an advisory staff sort of position, somebody to go out and crush your opponents as an attack dog along with Chris Christie. You haven't seen much from Christie now, have you, since that? I think Christie was a little bit sad that he didn't get chosen. He should have known better. He wouldn't make a good anything. He's not a good governor. He's a slimeball, ultimately. His glowing moment during the race was pointing out Marco Roboto and his own faults, and that's really his claim to fame as far as the primaries went. But yes, the RNC's viewership was significantly down. It's because fewer people are watching TV. They're not amalgamating data ratings from internet streams. They should start compiling that along with viewers on TV. They should compile it. Specifically because then you'd probably get around the same number as past conventions, both for the RNC and the DNC. The DNC suffered the same low viewership on television, but a lot of people were watching it on the internet. That's some millions or tens of millions of people overall. And you've got to understand, again, increasingly because the population is more independent and less partisan on both sides, there are fewer self-proclaimed Democrats and Republicans now. And even those labels have begun to lose meaning to some degree. Because of that fact, a lot of people, they don't really care enough, I think, to watch Trump speak for an hour, to watch Clinton speak for an hour. They're not going out of their way to absorb that material. What they are absorbing as far as politics goes is secondhand accounts of those speeches that are made, secondhand accounts of the news. They're watching analysis of the mainstream media. That is, I know I'm included in this group. I don't watch CNN. I don't watch Fox. I don't watch MSNBC. I don't watch any of these groups because I see them as biased, I see them as corrupt, and I see them as variously pandering to at least one candidate within the race for monetary purposes. So I don't really watch them. I get my news from underground news sites, aggregated and amalgamated on other sites. And I'd like to point out one final thing here. To those saying, oh, we'll talk about, one person pointed out, oh, talk about Clinton's 7-point lead. Clinton does not have a 7-point lead. That is a single poll. Her overall lead within RCP is 1.1 points, which is a statistical dead heat. It's well within the margin of error. Never look at a single poll, because it could be a complete outlier. Trump could be ahead by 10 points, and all the polls could be outliers right now, and we wouldn't really know it. We need to wait and see what happens with the next leak from WikiLeaks, the first debate, and those will be the big events that push the metric of this race. Unless something else major happens. You know, there's a significant, a serious assassination attempt. Somebody has a stroke up on stage, probably Hillary. One of their kids suddenly keels over and dies. Some major event could change the projections that I make. Right now, I project Trump at 299 electoral points. Right now, if the election were held today, I would expect Trump to win. That is based on my analysis of polling, my analysis of likely turnout, and so forth. This may change. The fact that I give Trump a significant advantage now doesn't mean that I would continue to do so. For instance, let's say he bombs at the first debate. He's terrible, and people give him like an F- because he's just so horrible. I don't think that'll happen. But let's say it did. That would significantly reduce his chances of being the next president. Let's say that the WikiLeaks leak, the next one, is from the Clinton camp, as it is likely to be. They've already released the DNC's material and the DCCC's material, so the fundraising apparatus. Let's say the next leak really is sort of the internal goings-on of the Clinton campaign itself. Let's say there are a few real monstrous sort of emails that were sent. Just 2 or 3 that people can fixate on. That would significantly decrease Hillary's remaining chances of winning. So my projection right now will change over time depending on what happens at these major turning points within the race. The fact that I predict Trump has an advantage now does not mean I'm certain he wins. I will continue to remain confident that he wins, because that could change. It could change in his favor. I could start giving him a 99% chance based on the first debate or the second debate or whatever. Or Hillary could suddenly take the lead in my estimation. Right now, because of the fact that he seems unaffected by lower fundraising, and in fact might be deriving a benefit from the fact that his opponent has raised almost $50 million total just from the hedge fund class and the bankers, and that makes her look like more of a neoconservative corporate figure, a bank-backed shill. Because of that, he has a systemic advantage going through the rest of the campaign. It doesn't hurt that his opponent is not as good at public speaking as he is. She's shown that time and time again. Is often unwilling to speak publicly. She doesn't really give impromptu interviews with the press. She doesn't give press conferences. She doesn't take questions. She doesn't like being questioned because she knows she can't answer a lot of these questions. Look at what she's saying now regarding her emails. Oh, I never sent classified information. The FBI confirmed it. Well, it's the exact opposite of truth. See, here's the problem. People point that out when it's brought up in the context of a press conference. That's when she has problems. It's better not to say anything than to give a press conference and incriminate yourself. It's better to look like a hermit who just doesn't want to talk to the media than to prove people right in their predisposition to believe that you're a liar. As far as the RNC and DNC go and their ratings go, I was correct. I was correct on Trump's VP. I was correct in virtually every primary state, Wisconsin, of course, aside. And Oklahoma, that's the other one. Then again, the polling was so spotty and so close there, I don't think anyone really had a clue what was going on. I'm going to exonerate myself on that one. Wisconsin, I was honestly very wrong on. Everything else throughout the primaries, it was kind of obvious what was happening. The reason why my analysis was accurate and others tended to be inaccurate. First, I was supporting a third-party candidate and still am. I didn't have a horse in the races, so to speak, so I didn't suffer from overly optimistic or pessimistic bias regarding either of the two main party candidates. That's number one. Number two, I paid attention to aggregated polls, not single polls, which is always important. And number three, where it was impossible to tell what was going to happen, as in the case with Missouri, I would say, Trump has a very slight advantage in Missouri, but it wouldn't be that surprising if Ted Cruz pulled off a win. And Trump ended up winning by, I think, 2,000 votes in the state, by less than a percentage point. And so that's what ends up happening. In the general election, again, if it continues on its current path, I would expect Trump to win Pennsylvania. I would expect him to win Florida. I would expect him to win Nevada and Wisconsin. Michigan. The states that I see currently Hillary able to win, as in even if she falters significantly as I expect after the first and second debates, even then she would retain several of the swing states. The ones I would see her retain, Virginia, certainly. They've struck down the voter ID law there as well. Gives her a slight advantage. Iowa, I don't think that the ruralites in Iowa are going to appreciate Trump very well. They're more on the Ted Cruz side. He'll capture the evangelical votes, but turnout will be lower. Now, across most of the red states, lower evangelical turnout won't hurt him because he's going to be leading by 10, 20 points in many of these states, in Wyoming or some place like that. So he doesn't need to worry about having lower turnout among the more religious demographic. But in a state on the fringes like Iowa, or certainly a place like Wisconsin where Ted Cruz did very well, it will prevent him from winning these states. He needs to focus on Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Really plow forwards there. Grab up the more moderate parts of the Rust Belt. And he needs to go after Florida and North Carolina. He needs to buff up support in North Carolina, which is easy. I mean, he won the Deep South handily. He needs to focus on northern Florida, as well as trying to get Rubio to stump around for him in the Miami area, and he has Florida. It'll be a sort of an unholy alliance that Hillary can't really overcome. As far as Nevada, anyone's guess. I see her retaining Colorado. Colorado is getting more blue, not less. It's not like Michigan. It's not like apparently Pennsylvania. And he doesn't even technically need, by the way, Michigan to win this. No, he doesn't actually need it. I see him winning it anyway, but he would still win without. I think he'd still win by 2 or 3 electoral points at that. It'd be very, very close, but he would win. That's sort of my reading of the race right now. But no, I was not inaccurate on Trump's VP, and I was spot on when it comes to the conventions, the viewership thereof. That's about all. Peace out.